The death penalty, justice, capital punishment, murder. Whatever you choose to call it, the death penalty is one of the most controversial parts of our criminal justice system, and for good reason. Many people believe that it is ethically and morally wrong to sentence a man or woman to death, even if he or she has killed another person. How can the government have the right to murder people when ordinary citizens are jailed for life for killing even someone who has harmed one of their friends or family members? The world would be a better place if we chose to simply imprison those who have done wrong, rather than murder them in a legal way. Many people have staged protests against the death penalty and capital punishment. These signs were photographed at an anti-death penalty rally in Seattle, Washington. This sign was photographed at a rally for abolishing the death penalty internationally. These protesters were photographed at the NCADP protest for the World Day Against the Death Penalty. People and officials who support the death penalty claim that it is a way for families to get closure when a family member is killed, or that it prevents the escape of a murderer from prison. How satisfying can it really be to someone who has lost a family member to know that they caused the murder of someone else? Do these families who have lost someone think on the misery that they could cause to someone else, or do they seek the death penalty solely for revenge, when they might more easily seek a life sentence without parole and avoid a loss of another life? Most of the states in the U.S. still have the death penalty and have death row prisoners in their jails and other detainment facilities. Michigan was the first U.S. state to abolish the death penalty, abolishing it in 1846. The state of Texas has the highest rate of executions, having conducted 436 executions since 1976, as well as having the highest number of death row detainees of any state at 373 prisoners. I think that if capital punishment has to be kept in some form, I would recommend that it be kept only as a punishment that the Supreme Court is authorized to use, and then only in extreme cases. If a convicted murderer or serial killer has escaped once, killed again, and there is no doubt that they are guilty of the accused crimes, then the use of capital punishment can be justified. However, another risk that we run in the use of capital punishment is that it is entirely irreversible, and we run the risk of murdering an innocent person wrongly accused of a murder or murders they did not commit. Jerry Buck Inman of Tennessee was sentenced to death in South Carolina on April 22, 2009 for the murder of a female college student in South Carolina. He pleaded guilty to strangling her with her own bikini top, which was found wound around her neck at the scene of the crime in May 2006. He asked that he be given the death penalty, saying that he was too violent to be rehabilitated in prison. Inman spent 19 years in prison for the assault and rape of 2 women in Florida. During this time, Inman attempted suicide 7 times. His defense attorney argued that life in prison would be more punishing, as Inman feels great guilt for his crimes, and sex offenders are often treated harshly by other prisoners. However, the judge accepted Inman's plea and sentenced him to death. Inman says there is no way to justify anything he has done, and that although there is nothing he can do to help ease the family's pain, he is sorry. One of the reasons that his attorney argued that he should not be executed was that he suffers from psychological problems. A social worker testified at his trial that Inman had been abused by his father since he was 3 and has long suffered from mental health problems. This brings up the complicated ethical issue of the execution of prisoners with mental health problems and of retarded people. The Supreme Court has outlawed the execution of retarded prisoners, but some defense attorneys find themselves hard-pressed to prove retardation in court. Our judicial system is so hell-bent on executing people that are on trial for crimes carrying the death penalty. They do not want to believe that people may not be guilty of crimes in the ethical sense and may not deserve the death penalty. Over the years, many people have been executed who may have been innocent. Certainly many of them probably did not deserve to die. Over the years, 113 death row prisoners have been exonerated in this country. The ACLU states that 1 in 20 death row inmates is later found to be innocent. Another great flaw in our American judicial system is that we allow the execution of defendants for crimes committed in the juvenile years before the defendant turns 18. In our country, an adult may be executed for a murder they committed when they were 17. It is against international law to apply the death penalty to children, although we continue to do so. In the past 3 years, only the United States, Congo, and Iran have executed juvenile offenders, children under 18 at the time they committed the crime, and the latter two countries have since explicitly repudiated the practice. 23 U.S. states allow juvenile offenders to be executed, but only 15 have juvenile offenders on their death row. Texas has nearly a third of the 84 current juvenile offenders facing capital punishment. In this country, 18 juvenile offenders have been executed since 1976, 10 of them in Texas. In the entire world, the United States is the only country that still claims the authority to legally execute juvenile offenders. One of the worst flaws in our system of capital punishment is not a law. It is our ingrained racist beliefs and prejudices. In North Carolina, in a study by the North Carolina Council of Churches, it was found that defendants who murdered a white victim were 3.5 times more likely to be sentenced to death than those who murdered a black victim. I believe that one of the reasons this happens is that an all-white jury is more likely to sentence someone who has killed someone they associate with themselves in some way to death than someone they do not see a strong connection to. This is not a logical or moral reason. It is a byproduct of the deeply ingrained prejudices in our society. We can claim that we have no prejudices, but any white person has some prejudice against people of color at some basic instinctual level simply because they are different. The same may hold true for people of color, but since they have traditionally not held positions of power in Western democracies, the prejudices they represent are much less noticeable. We may not consciously think differently about someone because of their race or religion, but we see them in an entirely different, yet to us, natural way because they are different from us. I believe that all the ethical and moral reasons for protesting capital punishment are completely valid, and that all power to execute a human being should be taken from the state courts and be given to the Supreme Court for use only in the most extreme situations. The death penalty is a way for families to exact revenge for the death of a loved one, but revenge is not what they should be seeking. An individual can be made to pay for his or her crimes without being put to death, and not sentencing people to death is a way to create a less prejudiced and violent culture in our judicial system.